The small town of Greenwoods, nestled between rolling hills and a serene river, was home to Rose and her mother, Beth. Their modest house, a quaint cottage with a white picket fence, stood as a testament to their resilience and love. Despite the challenges life threw at them, Rose and Beth found solace in the simplicity of their days. One sunny morning, Rose, a lively 10-year-old with a head full of curly brown hair, bounded down the stairs, eager to start her day. "Morning, Mum," Rose chirped as she entered the kitchen, where Beth was preparing breakfast. "Good morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep?" Beth asked, stirring pancake batter in a bowl. "Like a baby. What's for breakfast?" Rose said, eyeing the pancake mix. "Pancakes, your favourite, and a side of fresh fruit," Beth replied with a warm smile. As they sat at the table enjoying their breakfast, Rose spoke about her day at school. "Mrs. Hudson gave us a new assignment today, Mum. We have to write about our dreams for the future." Beth paused, looking thoughtful. "That sounds like a wonderful assignment. What do you dream of, Rose?" Rose's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "I want to be an astronaut. Imagine floating in space surrounded by stars and planets." Beth chuckled. "That's a big dream, sweetheart, but I believe you can achieve anything you set your mind to." After breakfast, Beth headed off to her job at the local library, leaving Rose to navigate the rest of the day. Rose spent her afternoons exploring the town, often accompanied by her best friend, a stray cat she affectionately called Whiskers. One day, as Rose and Whiskers roamed through the town's park, they stumbled upon a community garden. Intrigued, Rose decided to try her hand at gardening. "I bet we can grow the biggest sunflowers in town, Whiskers," Rose exclaimed as she dug into the soil. In the evenings, mother and daughter would come together for dinner, sharing stories and laughter. Their cosy living room became a haven, a place where dreams were nurtured. As the days turned into weeks, Rose's garden flourished and the bond between mother and daughter deepened. Beth, despite the challenges of being a single mother, worked tirelessly to provide a stable and loving home for Rose. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Beth asked, "Rose, what did you write in your assignment about your dreams?" "I wrote about us, Mum," Rose replied with a smile. "About our little house, our garden, and how you always make everything feel like home." Beth's eyes welled with tears as she embraced her daughter. "You're my biggest dream, Rose. No matter where life takes us, as long as we're together, we have everything we need." And so, in the small town, amidst the challenges and triumphs of life, Rose and Beth continued to cherish the simple moments that made their bond unbreakable. Rose's small town life was once touched by the presence of a loving father who served in the army. Captain James Anderson, a dedicated and caring man, found joy in sending heartfelt gifts to his daughter, Rose, from every corner of the world. Despite being miles apart, their connection thrived through the tangible pieces of love he sent home. In Rose's room, a world map adorned one wall, dotted with pins marking the places her father had travelled. The shelves held a treasure trove of souvenirs, delicate trinkets, exotic postcards, and small artifacts from the various countries he visited. Each item had a story, and Rose cherished the tangible proof of her father's love. One evening, as Rose and Beth sat in the cosy living room, a package arrived from overseas. The excitement in Rose's eyes was palpable as she tore open the carefully wrapped box. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden music box from Italy, playing a tune that transported them to the streets of Rome. "Mum, look, it's amazing!" Rose exclaimed, turning the delicate handle, the melody filling the room. Beth smiled, sharing in Rose's joy. "Your father has a way of bringing the world to us, doesn't he?" Days turned into months, and the gifts kept pouring in, each one a testament to Captain Anderson's love for his family. Rose's room became a sanctuary of memories, a gallery of the places her father had touched and the tangible reminders of his enduring affection. However, the blissful rhythm of their lives was shattered one fateful day. A knock echoed through their door, and a uniformed officer stood on their doorstep, delivering news that sent shockwaves through their hearts. Captain James Anderson had lost his life during a sudden attack, leaving Rose and Beth numb with grief. The room that once echoed with laughter and the melodies of distant lands became a solemn space filled with the weight of loss. The world map, once a canvas of joyous memories, took a bittersweet hue. Rose clung to the gifts from her father, finding solace in their tangible presence even as tears blurred the map's vibrant colours. As they mourned together, Beth and Rose navigated the difficult journey of grief. The music box from Italy played a mournful melody, a haunting reminder of the father who had touched their lives in profound ways. In the quiet moments, as Rose traced her fingers over the trinkets and souvenirs, she found comfort in the enduring love encapsulated within those cherished gifts. Captain James Anderson might be physically absent, but his presence lingered in the room, a beacon of love that illuminated their small-town life even in the face of tragedy. One evening, after a simple dinner of homemade soup, Rose noticed the worry lines on her mother's forehead. "Mum, is everything okay? You seem a bit tired," Rose asked, concerned about lacing her words. Beth sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Oh, it's just finances, sweetheart. The bills keep piling up and I'm trying my best to make ends meet, but sometimes it feels like we're barely keeping our heads above water." Rose frowned, her young mind trying to comprehend the weight of those words. "Can't we do something about it, Mum? Maybe I can help with my garden, sell some flowers or vegetables." Beth's eyes softened as she cupped Rose's face. "You're already doing so much with your garden, and I'm proud of you for that. We'll get through this, Rose. We'll always find a way." As the days passed, Beth took on extra shifts at the library, determined to provide for Rose. One evening she returned home to find Rose sitting on the porch gazing at the stars. "Mum, do you think the stars ever worry about running out of light?" Rose asked, her innocent question carrying a deeper meaning. Beth sat down beside her, a sad smile playing on her lips. "Sometimes I think we're like those stars, Rose. We face dark times, but as long as we keep shining, we can find our way through." Their financial struggles, though daunting, never overshadowed the simple joys they found in each other. One day, as Beth prepared a makeshift picnic in the living room with a few crackers and cheese, she looked at Rose and said, "We may not have much, but we have each other, and that's more valuable than anything money can buy." Rose nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "We're a team, Mum. We'll make it through anything together." And so in their small-town life with financial strains, Rose and Beth continued to cultivate their garden of love, finding strength in each other's company and the simple pleasures that adorned their modest home. One brisk autumn day, Rose was on her way to school when she noticed an old man sitting alone on a weathered bench near the town square. His eyes seemed distant, and the lines on his face told stories of hardships and struggles. What caught Rose's attention, though, was the emptiness in his hands and the hollow look in his eyes. Curiosity and compassion fueled Rose's steps as she approached the bench. "Hello, sir. Are you okay?" she asked with genuine concern. The old man looked up, his eyes meeting Rose's, and for a moment a flicker of surprise and gratitude crossed his face.
"Oh, hello, young lady. Just having a moment to myself, you know."
But Rose sensed something more. "Are you hungry, sir?" she asked, her voice soft and caring. The old man hesitated before nodding slightly.
"Well, I haven't had much to eat today."
Without a second thought, Rose reached into her backpack and pulled out the lunch her mother had prepared, a sandwich, an apple, and a small bag of nuts. "Here, "You can have my lunch. I hope it helps," she said, offering the meal to the old man. His eyes widened with surprise and gratitude.
"Oh, bless your heart, young one, thank you," he said, accepting the food.
Rose smiled warmly. "No problem, sir. Everyone deserves a good meal, especially on a chilly day like this." As the old man savoured each bite, Rose sat down beside him. They began to talk, sharing stories about their lives. The warmth of the shared meal transformed the bench into a place of connection and understanding. After finishing the last bite, the old man looked at Rose with a twinkle in his eyes.
"You have a heart of gold, young lady. Thank you for your kindness."
Rose blushed, feeling a sense of fulfillment. "It was the least I could do, sir. My mum always says, 'Kindness is like sunshine, it makes everything grow.'" The old man chuckled.
"Your mum sounds like a wise woman, and you, my dear, are a shining example of that kindness."
As Rose and the old man parted ways, the simple act of sharing a meal on a park bench left an indelible mark on both their hearts. In that moment, Rose not only fed the old man's hunger but also nourished a connection that transcended age and circumstance. And as she walked away, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the lesson in compassion her small town had taught her. That evening, Beth couldn't help but notice the subtle signs on Rose's face, a mixture of hunger and concern.
"Sweetheart, are you okay?"
Beth asked, her gaze focused on Rose. Rose forced a smile, attempting to brush off her hunger. "Yeah, Mum, I'm fine, just not very hungry today." Beth studied Rose's face, a mother's intuition telling her there was more to the story. Then she heard a distant grumble, and it wasn't coming from her stomach. "Rose," Beth said gently, "your stomach just made a sound louder than mine did. You're hungry, aren't you? Didn't you have your lunch today?" Rose hesitated, sensing her mother's tension. I met someone in the town square, Mum. An old man. He looked hungry, so I gave him my lunch." Beth's face tightened and a mix of frustration and worry crossed her features. "Rose, we can barely afford to put food on the table for ourselves. You can't just give away our meals like that." Rose's eyes welled up with remorse. "I just wanted to help, Mum. He seemed so lonely and hungry." Beth sighed, her frustration giving way to a heavy sigh. "Oh, I understand. Your heart is in the right place, sweetheart, but we're struggling ourselves. That lunch was the last bit of food we had for today." Tears filled Rose's eyes as she realized the gravity of her actions. "I'm sorry, Mum, I didn't think." Beth embraced Rose, holding her close. "I know you didn't, sweetheart. Your kindness is a beautiful thing. But we need to make sure we take care of ourselves first. We'll find a way to help others, but we must be mindful of our circumstances." The weight of her mother's disappointment weighed heavily on Rose's heart. She had only wanted to help someone in need, to make a difference in their lives, but now she felt the sting of her mother's words. Doubt started to creep into Rose's mind, questioning whether her act of kindness was worth the sacrifice they had made. Later that evening, as they sat in the dimly lit kitchen, Beth and Rose shared a meagre dinner. The weight of their financial struggles hung in the air, but so did an unspoken understanding of the importance of compassion within their means. "I'm proud of your generous heart, Rose. But we'll figure this out together, okay?" Beth said, her voice a mix of reassurance and determination. Rose nodded, wiping away her tears. "I promise, Mum, we'll find a way to help others without hurting ourselves." In that moment of shared vulnerability, the bond between mother and daughter deepened. The challenges they faced were real, but so were their love and resilience. As they navigated the trials of their small-town life, Rose and Beth held on to the hope that, together, they could weather any storm that came their way. The next day, as Beth went to the local grocery store, she carefully considered her options. A mix of worry and determination fueled her actions She picked up a few essentials, prioritizing items that would fill their stomachs without straining their budget too much. When Beth returned home, she found Rose engrossed in her schoolwork, her hunger momentarily forgotten. Setting down the grocery bags, Beth approached her daughter with a gentle smile. "I got a little something extra for us," Beth said, pulling out a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a few apples. Rose's eyes lit up with gratitude. "Thanks, Mum. Peanut butter sandwiches are my favourite." Beth ruffled Rose's hair, relieved to see the joy returning to her daughter's face. "We'll make do with what we have, sweetheart, and we'll make sure no one goes to bed hungry, especially not in our own home." As they enjoyed their simple yet comforting meal, the love between mother and daughter shone brighter than any financial struggle. In the face of adversity, Beth and Rose found strength in each other, determined to navigate their small-town life with resilience and unwavering support. The next day, Rose trudged through the familiar path home from school. As she approached the town square, she noticed an elegant, posh car parked nearby. Its sleek design stood in stark contrast to the simplicity of Greenwoods. A well-dressed young gentleman emerged from the car, his eyes scanning the surroundings until they locked onto Rose. With a warm smile, he approached her.
"Excuse me, are you Rose Anderson?"
he asked politely. Surprised, Rose nodded, her eyes still carrying the remnants of sorrow. "Yes, I am. How do you know my name?" The young man extended his hand.
"I'm Alexander, and my father mentioned meeting you yesterday. He spoke highly of your kindness. He's the old man you shared your lunch with."
Understanding dawned on Rose's face, and she shook his hand hesitantly. "Oh, you're Mr. Thompson's son. I didn't realise." Alexander interrupted with a kind smile.
"It's quite all right. My father was truly touched by your generosity. He insisted I offer you a lift back home as a token of gratitude."
A luxurious car waiting to take her home was a sight Rose could never have anticipated in their small town. The contrast between the elegant vehicle and the modest surroundings left her utterly shocked. Still processing the unexpected turn of events, she hesitated before finally accepting the offer. As the car glided through the familiar streets of Greenwoods, Rose marvelled at the unexpected kindness that had come her way. Alexander spoke with genuine warmth, sharing stories about his father and expressing gratitude for the companionship Rose had offered him. Mr. Thompson, once a common face in the town of Greenwoods, had risen to prominence as a successful businessman, accumulating wealth beyond imagination. Despite his opulent lifestyle, he found himself yearning for the simplicity of the old days, the familiar faces and the sense of community that defined life in a small town. One day, feeling the weight of nostalgia, Mr. Thompson decided to visit Greenwoods against his doctor's advice. His aging body protested the journey, but the longing for the town that once felt like home propelled him forward. With each step, he reminisced about the old friends and the charming simplicity that defined life in Greenwoods. As he arrived at the familiar town square, Mr. Thompson settled onto a bench, his eyes scanning the surrounding with a mix of sentimentality and regret. The doctor had warned him against such travels due to his declining health, but the allure of the past proved stronger than any cautionary advice. Soon the dizziness that had been lurking in the background intensified, causing Mr. Thompson to feel weak and disorientated. Unwilling to admit defeat, he resolved to stay put on the bench, hoping the fresh air and the town's ambiance would revive him. It was during this vulnerable moment that Rose, the kind-hearted young girl from Willow Creek, noticed the elderly man in distress. Noticing his pale complexion and weary demeanour, Rose approached with concern etched across her face. Mr. Thompson managed a weak smile, but Rose could sense the gravity of the situation. "You need something to eat, sir. I have some lunch with me. Would you like to share it?" Gratitude filled Mr. Thompson's eyes as he nodded, touched by the genuine kindness of this young girl. Rose eagerly shared her meagre lunch, and as Mr. Thompson took the first bite, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him.
"Thank you, my dear. Your generosity has done more for me than you can imagine," Mr. Thompson admitted, his voice filled with sincerity.
Rose smiled, her eyes reflecting the joy of helping someone in need. "I'm glad I could help, sir. Sometimes a little kindness goes a long way." As Mr. Thompson finished the meal, the colour returned to his cheeks and the dizziness began to subside. Rose's simple act of generosity had not only nourished his body but also rejuvenated his spirit. In that unexpected encounter at the town square, Mr. Thompson realised that the richness of life wasn't solely measured in wealth, but in the connections forged with kindred spirits. With new-found strength, he sat on the bench, taking in the beauty of green woods, grateful for the reminder that the simplicity and kindness he longed for still existed, even amid opulence. When they reached Rose's home, she thanked Alexander for the ride, her eyes holding a mix of appreciation and surprise. "I never expected anything like this. Your father is a kind man, and I'm just glad I could bring a little warmth to his day." Alexander nodded, his own eyes reflecting gratitude.
"We appreciate your kindness, Rose. If there's anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask us."
As Rose stepped out of the sleek, posh car that had graciously brought her home, her mother, Beth, stood by the doorway, eyes widening in disbelief. The contrast between the elegant vehicle and their modest surroundings left Beth momentarily stunned.
"Rose, what? How did you end up in that car?"
Beth asked, her voice a mix of astonishment and curiosity. Rose hesitated, still processing the unexpected turn of events. "Mom, this is Alexander, Mr. Thompson's son. He offered me a lift home as a thank you for sharing my lunch with his father yesterday." Beth's surprise deepened as Alexander approached, his demeanour polite and kind.
"Mrs. Anderson, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your daughter's kindness made a significant impact on my father, and I wanted to express our gratitude."
Beth extended her hand, a mixture of gratitude and confusion etched on her face.
"It's nice to meet you, Alexander. Thank you for bringing Rose home, but forgive me, I'm a bit taken aback by all of this."
Alexander chuckled warmly, understanding the unexpected nature of the situation.
"I completely understand, Mrs. Anderson. My father is recovering from an illness, and he wanted to visit the town that holds a special place in his heart. Rose's generosity made that visit possible."
Beth's eyes softened as she realised the depth of the connection between Rose and Mr. Thompson.
"Well, Rose has always had a big heart. We appreciate your kindness, Alexander."
Beth's eyes widened in realisation.
"Rose, you didn't tell me you met Mr. Thompson's son, and here I was scolding you for sharing your lunch."
Rose grinned mischievously. "Well, I didn't know yesterday, and you did scold me." Trying to stifle a laugh, Beth gave Rose a playful nudge, attempting to hush her.
"Shh, not in front of our unexpected benefactor. We can talk about it later."
As they stood on the porch, Alexander shared the story of how his father, against his doctor's advice, had secretly run away from home to visit Green Woods. He explained how Mr. Thompson, feeling dizzy and weak, had been revived by Rose's simple act of sharing lunch. Beth listened with a mixture of gratitude and empathy.
"I'm glad Rose could help. It's been a tough time for us lately, and her kindness truly warms my heart."
Alexander nodded, his eyes reflecting genuine appreciation.
"If there's anything we can do for you or Rose, please don't hesitate to ask. My family is grateful for the unexpected friendship that blossomed in the town square."
The unexpected ride had been a momentary diversion from the grief that still lingered within Rose, but it had also opened her eyes to the threads of compassion that wove through the fabric of their small town. As the posh car departed, Beth couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of the situation. The shock of seeing her daughter arrive in such style had turned into a moment of amusement and gratitude. As they walked back into their modest home, Rose and Beth shared a laugh, grateful for the unexpected twists that small-town life often brought their way. A few days after the surprising encounter at the town square, Rose and Beth received a formal invitation from Alexander Thompson to visit their mansion. The letter, adorned with elegant cursive handwriting, expressed Mr. Thompson's gratitude and the desire to thank them in person. Alexander, standing at their doorstep in a well-tailored suit, extended the invitation with sincerity in his eyes.
"Mrs. Anderson, Rose, my father would be honoured if you could join us at our mansion. He genuinely wants to express his gratitude for the kindness you showed him."
Beth exchanged a puzzled glance with Rose. The idea of visiting a mansion seemed worlds away from their simple small-town life. However, the genuine nature of Alexander's invitation and the desire to reciprocate Mr. Thompson's appreciation tugged at their hearts.
Please, it would mean a lot to him,"
Alexander insisted, his voice warm and persuasive.
"He often reminisces about the warmth of small towns, and your act of kindness has brought a piece of that to him."
Beth hesitated, glancing at Rose, who offered a reassuring smile.
"We appreciate the invitation, Alexander. It's just, we're not accustomed to such grand settings."
Alexander chuckled.
"I understand it might be a bit overwhelming, but my father insists. He truly values the connection he feels with both of you."
After a moment of contemplation, Beth nodded. "Okay, we'll come. But please convey our gratitude to your father. We don't want to impose." Alexander shook his head.
"You won't be imposing, I assure you. It would bring him immense joy to host you both."
As they approached the grand gates of the Thompson mansion on the agreed-upon day, Rose and Beth exchanged nervous glances. The sheer opulence of the estate stood in stark contrast to their humble lives. Alexander, noticing their hesitation, offered a reassuring smile.
"Relax, both of you. My father is truly looking forward to this, and he's eager to show you his respect for your kindness."
As they entered the sprawling mansion, surrounded by luxurious gardens and adorned hallways, Rose couldn't help but marvel at the grandeur. The Thompson mansion stood at the edge of green woods, a grand testament to the prosperity that Mr. Thompson had accumulated over the years. Its towering structure boasted intricate details in the architecture, with large windows framed by elegant curtains that allowed a glimpse into the opulence within. That day, the Thompson mansion buzzed with activity as the family gathered to meet Beth and Rose. Mr. Thompson, a dignified patriarch with silver hair and a warm smile, stood at the entrance to welcome them. His sons, Alexander and Keith, flanked him, each carrying the echoes of their unique personalities.
"Welcome, Beth and Rose. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you in our home," Mr. Thompson said, extending a gracious hand.
Beth, though initially feeling a bit overwhelmed by the opulence, smiled in gratitude.
"Thank you for having us, Mr. Thompson."
The two sons, Alexander and Keith, offered warm greetings. Alexander, the younger of the two, exuded charm and affability, while Keith, with a more reserved demeanour, portrayed a quiet strength.
"Hello, Beth, Rose. It's nice to finally meet you. Dad has spoken highly of both of you,"
Keith said with a friendly grin. As they entered the lavish living room, they were met by the lively presence of Ruby, Mr. Thompson's daughter. Ruby, with her vivacious spirit and a fondness for vibrant colours, greeted Beth and Rose with genuine enthusiasm. "Hello, you two. I'm Ruby. Oh, I can't wait to hear all about life in Greenwoods. Dad rarely brings visitors from there," she exclaimed, her laughter echoing through the room. Gloria, Keith's wife, entered the scene with the twins, adding a delightful touch to the gathering. The twins, a boy and a girl with mischievous grins, eyed Rose with curiosity.
"Beth, Rose, meet my wife, Gloria, and our little troublemakers here, Erin and Gabby," Keith introduced, a twinkle in his eyes. Gloria chuckled. "Troublemakers indeed, but they're the joy of our lives."
Mr. Thompson spoke with a mixture of pride and nostalgia.
"This mansion has seen so much over the years. It was Mrs. Thompson's dream, and we worked so hard to make it a reality."
Beth gazed at the sprawling estate, marvelling at its beauty.
It's truly magnificent, Mr. Thompson. Each corner seems to hold a story. As they ventured inside, the grandeur continued, with high ceilings adorned by chandeliers that cast a warm glow on the polished floors. Mr. Thompson gestured towards a painting on the wall, a portrait of his late wife.
She loved this place dearly. It was her way of showing love for our family and leaving a legacy.
Beth nodded, a sense of respect in her voice. It's a legacy indeed, Mr. Thompson, but what matters most is the love and warmth that still resides within these walls. As they strolled through the mansion's hallways, Mr. Thompson paused at the window overlooking the gardens.
This place may be grand, but it can also be lonely. It's the moments we share, the laughter and love that truly make it a home.
Together they continued exploring the mansion, its vast rooms and hidden nooks, each corner echoing with the shared stories of the years in the mansion. While initially hesitant, Rose and Beth found themselves immersed in the genuine hospitality of the Thompsons. As they shared stories and laughter, the boundaries between wealth and simplicity blurred and a newfound understanding blossomed. Mr. Thompson's memories of the town square were deeply intertwined with a love story that unfolded against the backdrop of green woods. In his younger days he had met the love of his life, a charming woman named Eleanor, beneath the shade of the old oak tree in the heart of the town square. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of laughter, shared dreams, and endless conversations on that very bench where Rose had found him years later. Eleanor had a contagious spirit, and together they navigated the highs and lows of life, forming a bond that withstood the test of time. Every day they would meet at the town square, sharing stories, dreams, and the simple joys of life. They revealed the beauty of the changing seasons, their love growing stronger with each passing day. As the seasons changed, their interactions evolved from casual greetings to shared laughter over cups of tea, and Mr. Thompson found comfort in Eleanor's company, a soothing balm to the loneliness that had lingered over him for a long time. One evening, as they sat on Mr. Thompson's porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Eleanor spoke from the heart. "You know, Mr. Thompson, I've come to cherish our time together. It's as if we're creating a story, a chapter at a time." Mr. Thompson nodded, a fond smile on his face.
Yes, Eleanor, it feels like a story, a beautiful one, unfolding right here in Green Woods.
As their friendship deepened, so did the unspoken emotions between them. One day, Eleanor gathered the courage to express what had been blooming within her heart.
"I care for you more than I thought possible, Mr. Thompson. Would you consider letting me be a part of your story in a different way?"
Touched by Eleanor's sincerity, Mr. Thompson took a moment before responding, his eyes glistening with gratitude.
Eleanor, I never expected to find love again. But with you it feels right. Let's continue writing this story together.
And so in the heart of Green Woods, their love story unfolded, echoing through the quaint streets and the cosy corners of their shared home. With each passing day, Mr. Thompson and Eleanor found joy in the simplicity of love, proving that even in the small town the most beautiful stories can emerge from the threads of everyday life. As the years unfolded, Mr. Thompson and Eleanor faced the challenges of life hand in hand. Mr. Thompson, fueled by a relentless determination to provide for the love of his life, immersed himself in various entrepreneurial endeavours. His hard work and ingenuity paid off, and success followed him as he became a prosperous businessman, transforming his life from a humble beginning in Green Woods to a world of opulence. Through it all, the town square remained a sacred space for Mr. Thompson and Eleanor. Even as their lives became intertwined with luxury and success, they found solace in the familiar embrace of the old oak tree. It became a symbol of enduring love and the foundation upon which their extraordinary journey was built. However, fate took a bittersweet turn when Eleanor fell ill. The town square, once a haven for joy, became a poignant backdrop for their final moments together. Eleanor passed away in the town they had grown to love, leaving Mr. Thompson with a wealth of memories and an immense void in his heart. In the years that followed, the old oak tree and the town square served as a silent witness to Mr. Thompson's visits. His fortune had grown, but his heart remained tethered to the cherished memories of his beloved Eleanor. Those moments of solitude at the town square allowed him to relive the laughter, the shared dreams, and the love that had shaped his life. As Mr. Thompson's health declined, the desire to revisit the town and its memories became overpowering. Against his doctor's advice, he embarked on a journey back to Greenwoods, hoping to find solace in the nostalgia that lingered in the air. Little did he know that his return would intertwine his story with Rose's, creating a bridge between generations and reminding him that the town square, with its enduring beauty, had the power to bring unexpected moments of kindness and connection, even in the face of adversity. In the end, the Thompson mansion became a symbol not of opulence, but of the unexpected connections that small-town life could forge. Rose and Beth left with hearts full of gratitude and the realization that, despite the differences, kindness and warmth could bridge any gap. Alexander pulled up in a sleek, posh car, dropping off Beth and Rose after a pleasant evening. The sound of the engine caught the attention of the Andersons' sneaky neighbour, Mrs. Jenkins, who peered through the curtains with a mixture of curiosity and envy. "Well, well, what have we here?" Mrs. Jenkins mumbled to herself, her eyes widening at the sight of the luxurious vehicle. Unable to resist the temptation of unravelling the neighbourhood gossip, Mrs. Jenkins quickly put on her coat and made her way over to Beth's house, wearing a saccharine smile. As she approached, she couldn't hide the awe in her voice. "Oh, Beth! Rose, what a pleasant surprise! I saw you arrive in that exquisite car. A new addition to the family, I presume?" Mrs. Jenkins inquired, her tone a mix of curiosity and feigned innocence. Beth, caught off guard by Mrs. Jenkins' sudden interest, replied cautiously, "Oh, that was Alexander, Mr. Thompson's son. He kindly dropped us off after dinner." Mrs. Jenkins, with a sly grin, continued her probing. "Mr. Thompson's son, you say? How delightful! It must be wonderful to have such esteemed company," knowing how rich and esteemed the Thompsons were. Rose exchanged a glance with Beth, sensing Mrs. Jenkins' hidden agenda. Still, Beth, ever polite, attempted to keep the conversation light. "Well, yes, it was a lovely evening. How have you been, Mrs. Jenkins?" Mrs. Jenkins, seizing the opportunity to insert herself into their lives, replied with faux cheerfulness, "Oh, you know, the usual. But enough about me. I'd love to hear more about your evening. Maybe we can have tea sometime and you can share all the details." Beth, recognizing the thinly veiled attempt at prying into their personal affairs, offered a diplomatic response. "That sounds nice, Mrs. Jenkins. We'll let you know." As Mrs. Jenkins bid them farewell, she retreated with a scheming smile, eager to spread the news of the Thompsons' newfound connections and stir the pot of neighbourhood gossip. Little did she know that the Thompson family, though accustomed to the trappings of wealth, valued the authenticity of relationships far more than the glitz and glamour that had caught Mrs. Jenkins' envious eye. Mrs. Jenkins, living in the comfort of her modest home, couldn't fathom the idea that a family less affluent than hers could form genuine connections with the wealthiest family in the area, the Thompsons. The stark contrast between her financial standing and the perceived closeness of Beth and Rose with the Thompsons fueled her envy and resentment. From her vantage point, Mrs. Jenkins struggled to comprehend the authenticity of the friendship between the Thompsons and Beth and Rose. In her narrow perspective, she believed that any connection between a less privileged family and the affluent Thompsons must be rooted in ulterior motives. Her inability to fathom the possibility of genuine bonds across financial divides led her to concoct a deceitful scheme to undermine and tarnish the reputation of Beth and Rose. In Mrs. Jenkins' mind, the idea of a poorer family being accepted into the fold of the wealthy Thompsons seemed preposterous. Instead of celebrating the diversity and genuine friendships that could thrive in their community, she allowed her jealousy to guide her actions, creating a web of rumours and lies to dismantle what she perceived as an inconceivable alliance. Her actions reflected not only a deep-seated resentment, but also a lack of understanding and empathy for the genuine connections that could transcend financial differences. The scheme she hatched with a misguided attempt to impose her own biased beliefs onto relationships around her, failing to recognise the strength of bonds forged through shared experiences, kindness and mutual respect. Driven by jealousy and a desire to tarnish Beth and Rose's reputation in the eyes of the Thompson family, Mrs. Jenkins hatched a cunning scheme. Determined to paint them in a negative light, she plotted a carefully orchestrated plan to exploit any vulnerability she could find. One evening, as the Thompson family gathered for a celebratory dinner, Mrs. Jenkins strategically timed a visit to Beth's house. Armed with a camera, she had the intention of capturing moments that could be misconstrued and later presented as evidence of inappropriate behaviour. With a deceptive smile, Mrs. Jenkins knocked on Beth's door.
"Hello, Beth. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I just thought I'd drop by for a friendly chat."
Beth, unaware of Mrs. Jenkins' ulterior motives, welcomed her inside. As they engaged in conversation, Mrs. Jenkins discreetly snapped pictures with her camera, carefully framing shots to suggest impropriety.
"Oh, what a lovely family you have. Such a shame that you're in such dire financial straits,"
Mrs. Jenkins commented, feigning sympathy. Beth, taken aback by the sudden shift in tone, responded defensively. "We managed just fine, thank you." With cunning precision, Mrs. Jenkins continued her scheme. "I've heard rumours about your financial troubles, and now with your daughter spending time with the Thompsons, one can't help but wonder about your motives." Beth's eyes narrowed in suspicion, sensing the malicious intent behind Mrs. Jenkins' words. "Our financial situation is none of your business, and Rose is just enjoying the company of her friends." As Mrs. Jenkins left, she couldn't hide the smug satisfaction on her face, believing her scheme would cast a shadow on Beth and Rose's integrity. Armed with her carefully captured images and twisted words, she set out to present her distorted version of events to the Thompson family. The next day, Mrs. Jenkins subtly circulated the misleading images and concocted stories within the community, laying the groundwork for the scheme to unfold. Unbeknownst to Beth and Rose, the shadows of deceit loomed over their reputations, threatening to unravel the genuine connections they had forged with the Thompson family. Mrs. Jenkins' cunning scheme sent ripples through the community, leaving a trail of distrust and confusion. The consequences were swift and impactful, casting an unwarranted shadow over Beth and Rose's reputation within the Thompson family and the town of Greenwoods. As the manipulated images and twisted stories circulated, the Thompson family, who had previously welcomed Beth and Rose with open arms, found themselves caught in the crossfire of gossip. The Thompson family, unaware of the malicious intent behind Mrs. Jenkins' actions, began to hear whispers and see distorted images that painted Beth and Rose in a negative light. The atmosphere in the mansion, once filled with warmth and camaraderie, now simmered with unspoken tension. Doubts began to seep into the minds of Mr. Thompson, Alexander, Keith, Ruby, and even Gloria. The carefully created web of deceit that Mrs. Jenkins had spun had created an atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust. One evening, as Beth and Rose visited the Thompsons, Alexander hesitated before addressing them.
Beth, Rose, there's been some talk in the town, rumours about your financial situation and the nature of your relationship with us. Do you have anything you'd like to share?"
Beth, taken aback by the unexpected accusation, replied with a mixture of frustration and confusion.
"Alexander, we value our friendship with your family. These rumours are baseless and meant to tarnish our reputation."
Ruby, Mr. Thompson's daughter chimed in with concern. "I don't understand why people would spread such rumours. We've always seen you both as genuine friends." Gloria, Keith's wife, who had been influenced by the rumours, voiced her doubts.
"I heard you were taking advantage of the Thompsons' generosity. Is that true?"
Rose, feeling the weight of the false accusation, fought back tears. "No, it's not true. We never intended to cause any trouble. We just wanted to be friends." Meanwhile, Mrs. Jenkins, watching from the shadows, revelled in the chaos she had orchestrated. She approached the Thompson mansion with a facade of innocence, feigning concern. "Oh, I heard there were some misunderstandings. I hope everything is okay," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Mr. Thompson, sensing the discord, addressed Beth and Rose with a solemn expression.
"I'm sorry, but this is causing tension. Perhaps it's best if we take some time apart."
As Beth and Rose left the mansion, the weight of injustice hung heavy on their hearts. The consequences of Mrs. Jenkins' deceitful scheme had severed the bonds of trust they had built within the Thompson family, leaving behind a trail of broken friendships and shattered reputations. As they walked away from the once welcoming mansion, Beth turned to Rose with determination.
"We may have lost their trust for now, but the truth will prevail. We'll find a way to clear our names and rebuild what was unjustly broken."
One evening, as Beth and Rose attended a community event, they could feel the cold stares and whispered conversations. The once friendly neighbours now regarded them with a mix of curiosity and scepticism. The warmth of the town square, where Rose had shared the simple lunch with the old man and received a lift from Alexander, now felt distant and unwelcoming. Inside the Thompson mansion, the consequences of Mrs. Jenkins' scheme unfolded. Tensions escalated as the family members, influenced by the false narrative, began to distance themselves from Beth and Rose. The once harmonious atmosphere within the grand estate fractured, and the trust that had bound them together began to erode. In an attempt to clear the air, Beth and Rose sought to address the rumours and share their side of the story. However, Mrs. Jenkins' manipulative plot had already woven a complex web that proved difficult to unravel. The damage to their reputation was done, and the genuine connections that had formed seemed to be slipping away. As the whispers continued and the consequences of Mrs. Jenkins' scheme manifested in strained relationships, Beth and Rose faced the heartbreaking reality that the town they had come to love was now a place of isolation and suspicion. The scheme had not only targeted their standing in the community, but also threatened the bonds they had forged within the Thompson family, leaving them to navigate a painful journey of rebuilding trust in the wake of deceit. Beth and Rose, reeling from the accusations and the sudden rift in their friendship with the Thompsons, found solace in each other's company. The weight of the unjust rumours bore heavily on their shoulders, but they were determined to understand the cause of the problem and mend the fractured bonds. In the quiet of their modest home, Beth and Rose sat at the kitchen table, their expressions a mix of disbelief and hurt. Rose, usually vibrant and full of energy, struggled to hold back tears. "I don't understand, Mum. We were only friends with the Thompsons. How did it turn into this?" Beth, with a furrowed brow, sighed in frustration. "I don't know, sweetheart. It seems someone has been spreading lies about us, and it's affecting our relationships. We need to get to the bottom of this." Determined to unravel the truth, Beth and Rose retraced their recent interactions with the Thompson family, searching for any signs of misunderstanding. As they reviewed each encounter, it became clear that the accusations were baseless. "I remember that evening at the Thompsons. Everything seemed normal. What changed?" Rose pondered, frustration evident in her voice. Beth nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. "We need to find out who's behind these rumours and put an end to it. Our friendship with the Thompsons means a lot to us." Their quest for truth led them to unexpected corners of the community. They began talking to neighbours, subtly probing for any hints of the source of the rumours. As they delved deeper, they uncovered a pattern of malicious gossip, all pointing back to Mrs. Jenkins. One day, as they confronted Mrs. Jenkins about the rumours, she feigned innocence.
"I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just a concerned neighbour."
Beth, her patience wearing thin, looked her in the eye. "Enough of the lies. We know you've been spreading rumours about us. What do you gain from tearing our friendships apart?" Mrs. Jenkins, caught in her deceit, faltered for a moment before attempting to shift blame.
"I only wanted to protect the Thompsons from people who might take advantage of their kindness. I never thought it would go this far."
Beth, simmering with frustration, retorted, "Kindness is something you wouldn't understand, Mrs. Jenkins. We value our friendships genuinely, and we won't let your lies destroy them." With the truth exposed, Beth and Rose faced the arduous task of rebuilding the trust that had been eroded by Mrs. Jenkins' deceit. The road ahead was challenging, but they remained steadfast in their commitment to truth and genuine connections, determined to mend what had been unjustly broken. One evening, Alexander Thompson happened to be dining at a local restaurant when he overheard a hushed conversation that piqued his interest. As he neared the source of the discussion, he was surprised to find Mrs. Jenkins engaged in an animated conversation with another neighbour. His senses heightened, Alexander discreetly eavesdropped on their conversation, and the fragments he caught were enough to raise suspicions. Mrs. Jenkins seemed to be discussing the Thompson family, and more specifically, Beth and Rose, with an air of malicious intent. Unable to ignore the mounting unease, Alexander decided to confront Mrs. Jenkins. He approached her table with a stern expression, his eyes reflecting a mix of disappointment and determination.
"Mrs. Jenkins, care to explain what you were just talking about?" Alexander inquired, his tone carrying a weight of authority.
Startled, Mrs. Jenkins stammered, attempted to feign innocence.
Alexander, I was just sharing some concerns about the neighbourhood. Nothing important."
Alexander, however, wasn't easily fooled.
"I overheard enough to know you're spreading false information about Beth and Rose. Why would you do that?"
Mrs. Jenkins, cornered and now facing confrontation, tried to deflect the blame.
"Well, I heard things, and I thought it was my duty to protect the Thompson family from potential troublemakers."
Alexander's gaze remained unwavering.
"Protect them? More like tarnish their friendships. I find it hard to believe you are acting out of concern. What's your real motive, Mrs. Jenkins?"
As the truth unravelled, Mrs. Jenkins could no longer maintain the facade of innocence. She reluctantly admitted,
"I couldn't fathom a family like theirs having a genuine connection with the Thompsons. It just seemed too unlikely. I thought I was protecting them from being taken advantage of."
Alexander, disappointed by her lack of understanding and fueled by a sense of justice, responded sternly,
"You've caused irreparable damage with your baseless accusations. Genuine friendships aren't defined by wealth, and you've jeopardized relationships that meant a lot to my family. This needs to stop, Mrs. Jenkins."
Caught in her web of deceit, Mrs. Jenkins had no choice but to confront the consequences of her actions. Alexander, armed with the truth, left her to reflect on the damage caused by her unfounded jealousy and prejudice. The revelation served as a powerful reminder that genuine connections could flourish across social and economic divides, and Mrs. Jenkins was left to grapple with the consequences of her misguided attempts to undermine those bonds. Confronted with the truth and the consequences of her deceit, Mrs. Jenkins found herself facing a humbling reality. The weight of her actions pressed heavily on her conscience as she acknowledged the need to apologize to Beth and Rose for the damage she had caused. One afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins mustered the courage to approach Beth and Rose's home. Her footsteps felt heavy with remorse as she knocked on the door. Uncertainty etched on her face. When Beth opened the door, Mrs. Jenkins took a deep breath, ready to admit her wrongdoing.
"Beth, Rose, may I come in? I owe you both an apology,"
Mrs. Jenkins said, with a sincerity that contrasted starkly with her previous actions. Beth, surprised by Mrs. Jenkins' presence, nodded and gestured for her to enter. As they gathered in the living room, Mrs. Jenkins began to express her remorse.
I want to apologize for the rumors and false accusations. I let jealousy and prejudice cloud my judgment. It caused harm to your reputation and relationships, Mrs. Jenkins confessed, her eyes reflecting genuine regret. Beth and Rose, though still hurt by the betrayal, appreciated the sincerity of Mrs. Jenkins' apology.
It's been difficult for us, Mrs. Jenkins. We valued the friendships we had, and your actions hurt deeply. But if you're sincere about making amends, we're willing to listen, Beth responded with a measured tone. Mrs. Jenkins, realizing the gravity of her actions, continued to express remorse and sought forgiveness. It became evident that her misguided attempt to protect the Thompsons had backfired, and genuine friendships had suffered as a result. The consequences of Mrs. Jenkins' actions extended beyond the personal realm. The community, now aware of her deceit, began to distance themselves from her. The once respected neighbour found herself isolated, her reputation tarnished by the repercussions of her jealousy and dishonesty. Meanwhile, Alexander, who had played a pivotal role in uncovering the truth, made it clear to Mrs. Jenkins that her actions had not only damaged individual relationships, but had also eroded the trust within the community. You need to understand the impact of your actions. Rebuilding trust takes time, and some wounds may never fully heal,
he warned, leaving Mrs. Jenkins to reflect on the broader consequences of her choices. As Mrs. Jenkins grappled with the fallout of her deceit, the community learned a valuable lesson about the importance of trust, sincerity, and the resilience of genuine connections. The process of rebuilding relationships had begun, but the scars of Mrs. Jenkins' actions would serve as a lasting reminder of the fragility of trust within their close-knit neighbourhood. In the aftermath of the apology, Beth and Rose focused on rebuilding their relationships and restoring the trust that had been shaken. The incident, while painful, also revealed the resilience of their bonds and the support they had within the community. Mrs. Jenkins, on the other hand, was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions, a cautionary tale of the destructive potential of envy and prejudice. Recognizing the impact of the false accusation and the strain it had put on their relationships, the Thompson family felt a deep sense of responsibility. Alexander, along with his father, Mr. Thompson, took it upon themselves to extend a sincere apology to Beth and Rose for the pain caused by Mrs. Jenkins' deceit. One evening, the Thompson family invited Beth and Rose to their mansion, where they set stage for a heartfelt conversation. The atmosphere was tense as apologies were offered, acknowledging the breach of trust that had occurred.
Beth, Rose, we want to express our deepest apologies for the turmoil you've endured because of the false accusations. What happened was unjust, and it should never have occurred.
Mr. Thompson spoke with a tone of regret, his eyes reflecting genuine remorse. Alexander, standing beside his father, continued,
We should have been more discerning and not allowed baseless rumours to affect our judgment. Your friendship means a lot to us, and we're truly sorry for any pain caused.
Beth and Rose, though still hurt by the events that transpired, appreciated the sincerity of the Thompsons' apologies.
It's been a challenging time for us, but we understand that you too were misled. We appreciate your honesty and the effort to make amends, Beth acknowledged, her tone reflecting a willingness to rebuild the bonds of trust. In the days that followed, the Thompson family took steps to rectify the situation within the community. They made it clear that Beth and Rose were not to blame for the false accusations and urged the neighbours to refrain from perpetuating baseless rumours. The Thompsons' public support played a crucial role in dispelling the lingering doubts within the community. However, there were individuals who, despite their apologies, chose to turn a blind eye and perpetuate the judgment cast upon Beth and Rose. The Thompsons, dismayed by this continued animosity, doubled their efforts to mend the fractured relationships. They hosted community events, invited Beth and Rose to participate, and encouraged open dialogue to foster understanding. Over time, the sincerity of the Thompsons' apologies and their commitment to rebuilding trust began to bear fruit. Some neighbours, realising the injustice that had been done, started to re-evaluate their perspectives and gradually welcomed Beth and Rose back into the fabric of the community. The process of healing was gradual, but the Thompsons' commitment to rectifying the situation showcased the strength of their character and their genuine desire to see justice prevail.
As the community slowly turned away from the shadows of suspicion, Beth and Rose found solace in the resilience of their relationships and the enduring bonds that surpassed the trials they had faced. As the days passed, the wounds caused by Mrs. Jenkins' deceit began to heal. The Thompsons' genuine efforts to mend relationships within the community played a crucial role in restoring a sense of normalcy. Beth and Rose found themselves gradually welcomed back into the fold of their tight-knit neighbourhood. The community, having witnessed the resilience and strength of character displayed by Beth in the face of adversity, started to notice the remarkable efforts she was making to run her household all by herself. Beth's determination, combined with Rose's unwavering support, had not gone unnoticed. Whispers of admiration spread through the community as neighbours began to see beyond the shadows of false accusations. One sunny afternoon, as Beth and Rose were tending to their garden, a distinguished-looking gentleman approached their home. His warm smile and genteel demeanour immediately put them at ease.
Good afternoon, Beth. Rose, my name is Charles, and I come bearing good news, so don't need to worry, he said with a twinkle in his eye.
Beth, curious yet cautious, invited him inside. As they sat in the living room, Charles began to unfold a surprising revelation.
I've been going through some old records and documents, and I came across a trust fund that was set up in the name of your late husband, Captain James Anderson. It seems to have gone unnoticed all these years, Charles explained.
The discovery was not merely a stroke of luck, it was a result of Charles' meticulous examination of records spanning decades. The trust fund, established many years prior, had seemingly been lost in the annals of time, buried beneath layers of administrative paperwork and the passage of years. Charles, understanding the potential impact of this revelation, made it a priority to share the news with Beth and Rose. His decision to personally deliver the information was driven by a genuine desire to ensure the accuracy of the message and to offer support to the family that had faced unwarranted challenges. Beth's eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and disbelief. "The trust fund? But how?" Charles continued.
It appears that Captain Anderson had arranged for a trust fund to support you and Rose in the event of unforeseen circumstances. The funds have accumulated over the years, and it's quite a substantial amount.
Beth, overcome with emotion, exchanged a glance with Rose. The news of the trust fund was a bittersweet revelation, a reminder of the thoughtful provisions made by Captain James Anderson for the well-being of his family. Charles, with a keen eye for detail and a genuine interest in the community's history, had been conducting a thorough review of old records and documents within the town's archives. It was during this meticulous exploration that he unearthed a hidden gem, the long-forgotten trust fund established in the name of Beth's late husband, Captain James Anderson. The archives, stored in a dimly lit room with towering shelves filled with aging documents, held the historical tapestry of the town. It was within this repository of the past that Charles stumbled upon a collection of dusty boxes containing records of financial transactions, wills, and trusts. As he sifted through the aging papers, a faded document caught his attention, the details of a trust fund in the name of Captain James Anderson. As Beth and Rose processed the news, their emotions ranged from disbelief to gratitude. The rediscovery of the trust fund was a beacon of hope, symbolizing a silver lining amid adversity. The once-forgotten financial provision became a source of comfort, offering a lifeline to a family that had weathered the storm of baseless accusations. The community, having witnessed Beth's resilience and now learning about the unexpected financial support, rallied around them. The initial misunderstanding that had cast a shadow on their lives had transformed into a narrative of triumph over adversity. Word spread throughout the neighbourhood, and neighbours who had once harboured doubts now extended their support and admiration for Beth and Rose. The community that had witnessed their struggle now celebrated their newfound stability. The trust fund not only provided financial security, but also served as a testament to Captain James Anderson's enduring love and care for his family, even from beyond the grave. As Beth and Rose embraced the positive turn of events, the community rejoiced in the redemption of a story that had initially been marred by false accusations. The trust fund became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring strength of a community that chose understanding and unity over baseless judgment. With the rediscovery of the trust fund and the community's acknowledgement of the unjust accusations, Beth and Rose's lives began to take a positive turn. The newfound financial stability not only lifted the burden of immediate concerns, but also allowed them to explore new opportunities and embrace a brighter future. Beth and Rose, now free from the shadows of false accusations, found a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. As they navigated their daily lives, their routine activities transformed into moments of joy and gratitude. The small town of Greenwoods witnessed a revival of the warmth and laughter that had once defined Beth and Rose's presence. After the incident and the revelation of Mrs. Jenkins' deceit, her social standing within the community took an unexpected turn. Once considered a respected neighbour, Mrs. Jenkins found herself facing the consequences of her misguided actions. The community, though forgiving in nature, remained wary of her, and her attempts to rebuild connections became both humorous and awkward. One day, Mrs. Jenkins decided to approach Beth in a local cafe. Beth, sipping her coffee, looked up to see Mrs. Jenkins nervously fidgeting.
Beth, do you have a moment?
Mrs. Jenkins asked, attempting to initiate a conversation. Beth, with a raised eyebrow, replied, "Sure, Mrs. Jenkins. What can I do for you?" Mrs. Jenkins, trying to find common ground, awkwardly blurted out,
"I heard you're into gardening. I've been trying my hand at it too. Maybe we could exchange tips or something."
Beth, suppressing a smile, responded, "Gardening tips, huh? Well, I suppose we can share ideas. Gardening brings people together, right?"
Mrs. Jenkins, enthusiastic about the prospect of newfound friendship, continued her efforts. She attended community events, often hovering around Beth and Rose, attempting to join their conversations. On another occasion, she approached them at a local market, holding a basket filled with fruits.
"Beth, Rose, I thought you might like some fresh fruits. As a peace offering."
Beth, chuckling, accepted the basket.
"Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. It's the thought that counts." Undeterred, Mrs. Jenkins even tried to engage in small talk about the weather, local news, and anything she thought might bridge the gap. Despite her earnest attempts, the exchanges often left Beth and Rose exchanging amused glances. One day, as Mrs. Jenkins approached with a plate of homemade cookies, she nervously remarked,
"I baked these for you. I thought we could, bond over cookies."
Beth, amused, responded,
"Mrs. Jenkins, I appreciate the gesture, but maybe we can keep things simple. No need for grand gestures."
As time passed, the community witnessed Mrs. Jenkins' persistent, albeit humorous, attempts at reconciliation. The once formidable neighbour had become a source of comic relief, and the town, known for its tight-knit bonds, embraced the awkward yet endearing efforts. Amid the town's ongoing activities and events, Mrs. Jenkins, clad in gardening gloves or bearing homemade treats, continued her quest to befriend Beth and Rose. While the relationship she once tried to undermine had flourished, Mrs. Jenkins found herself on a light-hearted journey of redemption, proving that sometimes laughter and genuine efforts could pave the way to forgiveness and understanding. Despite the awkwardness of Mrs. Jenkins' initial attempts at friendship, Beth, with her generous spirits, decided to include her in various community activities. She recognized the sincerity behind Mrs. Jenkins' efforts and believed in the power of forgiveness and redemption. Beth finally decided to invite Mrs. Jenkins over for tea. Mrs. Jenkins, surprised by the invitation, eagerly accepted.
"Oh, yes, Beth! I'd love to. Thank you for inviting me."
Over time, Beth's genuine gestures of inclusion extended beyond tea parties. She invited Mrs. Jenkins to neighbourhood events and community dinners, and even suggested they attend a local book club together. Mrs. Jenkins, grateful for the chance at redemption, eagerly embraced each opportunity, becoming an active participant in the community she had once tried to undermine. One day, as Beth and Rose were setting up a booth at the town fair, Mrs. Jenkins approached with a tray of freshly baked cookies.
I thought these might be a hit at the fair. What do you think, Beth?"
she asked, a hopeful glint in her eyes. Beth chuckled.
"Mrs. Jenkins, you've been quite the contributor to our community events. These cookies will be a hit, I'm sure."
Mrs. Jenkins, once fueled by jealousy and misunderstandings, now found herself admiring Beth and Rose for their resilience and kindness. She became a follower of their endeavours, offering support and encouragement at every turn. Her admiration was not driven by envy, but by a genuine appreciation for the positive influence Beth and Rose had on the community. One day, as they sat together at a community picnic, Mrs. Jenkins turned to Beth with gratitude in her eyes.
"Beth, I never thought I'd be a part of something so wonderful."
"Thank you for giving me a chance."
Beth smiled.
"We all make mistakes, Mrs. Jenkins.
What matters is how we choose to move forward. I'm glad to see you embracing the community and finding joy in being a part of it." The once tense relationship had evolved into a heartwarming tale of redemption, forgiveness, and the transformative power of inclusion. Beth, with her open heart and willingness to see the good in people, had not only mended fences, but also helped Mrs. Jenkins rediscover the joy of genuine connections within the close-knit community of Greenwoods. One sunny morning, Beth and Rose decided to visit the local farmers' market. As they strolled through the vibrant stalls, the aroma of fresh produce and the chatter of the community filled the air. Rose, her eyes gleaming with excitement, exclaimed, "Mum, can we try cooking something new with these fresh ingredients? Maybe we can invite the Thompsons over for dinner." Beth smiled, embracing the idea of sharing moments of joy with their newfound community.
"Oh, that sounds wonderful, Rose. Let's make it a celebration of friendship and new beginnings."
On weekends, Beth and Rose explored the scenic trails that surrounded Greenwoods. The tranquil beauty of nature became a source of solace, providing them with moments of reflection and connection. As they hiked through the woods, Rose remarked, "Mum, I never knew our town had such beautiful places. It's like we're discovering a whole new world." Beth nodded in agreement.
"Yes, Rose. Sometimes it takes overcoming challenges to truly appreciate the gems that surround us."
The trust fund also allowed Rose to pursue extracurricular activities at school that she had only dreamt of. With a newfound sense of financial security, Rose joined art classes where she discovered her passion for painting. Her creations adorned the walls of their home, each stroke of the brush telling a story of resilience and hope. As Beth and Rose embraced the newfound chapters of their lives, the town of Greenwoods became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of genuine connections. The once shattered bonds that had been rebuilt, and the tapestry of their lives now bore the vibrant hues of hope, friendship, and the promise of brighter tomorrows. In the aftermath of the false accusations and the rediscovery of the trust fund, Beth and Rose's life took a positive turn. The Thompson family, having played a significant role in rectifying the misunderstandings, welcomed Beth and Rose back into their lives with open arms. One day, as Beth and Rose were strolling through the town square, they noticed Mr. Thompson sitting on a bench, enjoying the sunshine. With a warm smile, Beth approached him.
"Mr. Thompson, we owe you so much. Thank you for standing by us during those difficult times."
Mr. Thompson, his eyes reflecting sincerity, responded,
"Beth, Rose, you've proven the strength of your character, and I'm glad we could help set things right. You're a part of this community, and we're here to support you."
Over time, Rose's bond with Mr. Thompson deepened. She became a frequent visitor to the Thompson mansion, and a special connection blossomed between her and the elderly gentleman. Rose, with her vibrant energy, brought a new lease of life to Mr. Thompson's world. One afternoon, as they sat in the Thompsons' elegant living room, Mr. Thompson turned to Rose with a gentle smile.
"You know, Rose, you remind me so much of my daughter when she was your age. The same curiosity and zest for life."
Rose, touched by the sentiment, replied, "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It means a lot. I've learnt so much from you and your family." As the days went by, Rose and Mr. Thompson developed a routine of sitting together, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. Mr. Thompson, with a twinkle in his eye, would recount tales of his youth and the history of Greenwoods. Rose listened with rapt attention, cherishing the wisdom and experiences shared by her newfound friend. On a chilly evening, As Rose visited Mr. Thompson to check up on his health, he looked at her with gratitude.
Rose, your company brightens my days. I'm fortunate to have you as a friend.
Rose, ever caring, responded, Mr. Thompson, you've become like family to us. We appreciate everything you've done for Mum and me. It's the least I can do to ensure you're doing well. Their friendship became a source of joy not only for Mr. Thompson, but for the entire community. The once tarnished bonds had transformed into something resilient and beautiful, proving that genuine connections could withstand even the harshest storms. As they sat together, overlooking the town square, Mr. Thompson's eyes twinkled with appreciation for the young girl who had brought warmth and companionship into his life. Rose, in turn, found a mentor and a friend in Mr. Thompson, whose stories enriched her understanding of the town's history and the value of enduring friendships. Their relationship served as a living testament to the healing power of understanding, forgiveness, and the enduring bonds that could be forged in the most unexpected circumstances. In the heart of Greenwoods, Beth and Rose, alongside the Thompson family, celebrated the beauty of unity and the resilience of the human spirit.